Okay, so good morning, everybody. Let me just check and see if we're all set. Good morning. Oh, let's see. Good morning. Yeah, good morning. All right. So we are here for our daily briefing. Just as a short reminder in the beginning, we're trying to take Sundays off, so we'll hopefully see you again Monday unless something major happens. So today we're going to go through our usual agenda of some information updates from around central New Mexico. Then we are going to touch on the some sort of list of different updates from our Emergency Operations Center that I have here. And then we're going to do our deep dive actually with our city clerk, and it's because of this concept of government continuity in the time of Corona and how we're going to operate our boards and commissions with respect to adherence to the Open Meetings Act and public comment and so forth. So that's going to be one of our topics. The other one, we'll talk just a little bit about the convention center. So we're here at our convention center, and we'll talk about the usage of this facility for different emergency purposes. So let me begin with some updates from our Joint Information Center. A couple of things. The New Mexico Department of Health, in conjunction with the city, we did mention last time, reported, of course, the outbreak at La Vidiena long-term care facility, where 2 residents have passed away and 19 residents and 3 staff have tested positive. I know that was mostly touched on last night, but we just wanted to reiterate off that these events that are happening at our centers, at our elder care facilities, that how high risk these are right now. So I do know the Department of Health, these facility operators, and the City Environmental Health Department, we are working as fast as we can to try and work on every protocol we can in those facilities. But unfortunately, as we're seeing around the country, they are just ripe for outbreak. And so we remain being very concerned, but doing what we can for them. Now, some other updates with respect to a couple of topics. Number one, we're working next week to try and set up a drive-up wireless program. This is going to be a way for us to help, especially parents and kids who don't have access to the internet, but even people working out of their car. If folks are driving around, they haven't noticed, there are a lot of professionals who are just sitting in the parking lot of Starbucks on conference calls all day. We're trying to find a way to use and leverage city resources, including our Sun Vans, to provide internet in large parking lots. So stay tuned for how that's going to work and how it's going to play out next week. It's also in conjunction with APS, so we can help with individuals who don't have internet so they can download their homework assignments and so forth. So those two concepts are hopefully going to come together next week with our drive-up testing program. Okay, another item to touch on is just that one thing is we are getting lots of local businesses offering the sort of face screens. That's different than face masks. That's very helpful. So if other manufacturers are able to do that, we're in touch with several, but contact 311 if you want the short way, or our Emergency Operations Center. We are in communication with several companies who might be able to offer 3D printed face shields locally right here in Albuquerque. That's a very helpful thing. Also want to touch on, we are looking at opening up some hotels as emergency shelters. This could be used for employees, public health workers, anyone who's an essential service as a third space. So if they can't go home and they also can't go to work, we're looking at leveraging our hotel vacancy stock to do that. And we're in touch with a lot of private hotel operators to do that. And of course, we're also looking at, if we really have a lot of people fitting that category, how we can use additional city facilities for, again, that third space if it's not appropriate to go home and it's also it doesn't make sense to go to work. I also want to mention, going back to our long-term care facilities, there are 158 assisted living and long-term care facilities that we've reached out to with guidance, practices, and procedures regarding COVID-19. We are also in communication with these facilities about how to handle dining. You might remember, if you've visited these facilities or have family members in them, Most of them either have a buffet set up or they have a centralized dining hall. This is one issue that we're working with them to try and figure out how they can do food distribution in the rooms or have metering and so forth so individuals can get their food. But that's one key area that we're really working with them through our environmental health department on what to do in the time of Corona. Okay, city buildings, want to mention for anyone working at a city facility, we're continuing to roll out the CDC recommended protocols to have some screening, including a fever check screening before you enter the building. This goes from City Hall all the way down to every facility, but we're rolling this out over time as we're able to get things like the thermometers and so forth. So this is going to be happening at our community centers and so forth starting this week. We'll have detailed information for all city employees probably coming out Monday on how we're going to do that. But we want to do this to demonstrate, we hope, if you can, all businesses, all essential businesses should be doing this. So especially grocery stores is a very good example. As employees come in, they should go through the CDC recommended pre-screening protocol. And this is also something I talked to the Grocers Union about yesterday, our local grocers union here in New Mexico, and this was also something that they really requested, is that pre-screening mechanism to be followed by all grocers. That would be similar for big box retailers as well. Okay, now with that, let me talk a little bit about this convention center facility right here behind us. This is the main hall in the east wing of the convention center. This is what we typically use for our track and field events. As you can see, the track's been put away. That was one of the first major events in Albuquerque that was eventually canceled. So this is where, if we need it, we know that it's great news that the State Department of Health and the Old Loveless Hospital and our Army Corps of Engineers are working to ready that facility. We are looking at this facility if we need another location here in Albuquerque for medical services and or possibly for, again, this third space area. And as you can see, it's actually sort of perfect for the cubicle setup that the Army's been using in other places in the country and so forth. There's 13,000 square feet here. And as you can imagine, with all the events being canceled, it is certainly available. It's centrally located near our 3 major hospitals. We also have 800 parking spots. So it's very easy to accommodate social distancing and so forth in this facility. Also, because our convention center is big enough, it is possible we can use the west side, that's sort of the main traditional part that we think of at the convention center for banquets and things like this. We can use that for other emergency services. So what this does allow us to is really to have a medical wing and a non-medical wing. We'll see what we need in the future, but we're going to use all city assets as best we can, including the convention center if we need it. Now, let's talk a little bit about government continuity. As we've mentioned from day one, we want to maintain our safety net. We want to also maintain city government, whether it's these updates that we're having with you, whether it's trying to make sure our employees know who's essential, who's not, who can work from home, who needs to go to work, to keep our city running and to keep our safety net operating, from our emergency childcare that we're operating to our ADA wheelchair accessible transport that we're providing through Sun Vans, to everyone in the solid waste department, and even the folks right now in parks and open space. There's a whole host of folks that we're working with to keep government going. But there's another piece of government that has to do with decision making and policy making. And as we look over the long term, initially we looked at all our boards and commissions and we basically said, look, let's just cancel them for a month. And so that was a great idea and is a great idea for about a month. But as this goes longer, even if this goes 2-3 months, we have to continue to keep government operating. And so part of that means having virtual ways for our boards and commissions to meet, and also important ways for the public to provide public comment. And so we've worked out some guidance, some rules and regs for this, going through our city clerk's office. We have a wonderful city clerk who also happens to be a lawyer, which helps, and frankly is an expert really in open government and IPRA and things of this nature. So we're fortunate to have him as our clerk at this time. And he's going to explain how we're taking the guidance from our Attorney General, Hector Balderas, and the guidance that's been given through open meetings during this time, and we're applying that to our boards and commissions. And so for the city boards, the boards that the administration is essentially responsible for administrating, these will be more or less requirements unless there's unique situations for a particular board. I do want to highlight that the administration, the mayor's administration, is not in charge of the Police Oversight Board. That's an independent entity that will follow their own rules. So please reach out to them if you have questions with that. And of course, it doesn't apply to City Council. City Council sets their own rules as well. But this does apply to some very important boards like the EPC. That's the Environmental Planning Commission, very important for the business community. Also the Air Quality Board, another one, very important. These regulate permitting and so forth throughout our city in central New Mexico, and so we have to have a way to keep them running and make sure that the public has an ability to provide public comment and that we're following the Open Meetings Act. This also includes DRB, the Development Review Board, again, very important for the business community. This also includes the Albuquerque Development Commission, or EDC. This also includes the Lodgers Tax Board, which makes recommendations on lodgers tax, which, of course, right now we have very little of. But when that rebounds and so forth, again, another board that these rules will apply to. This also applies to the Open Space Board. We might have to make some decisions with respect to open space, and so that board plays an important role there. Also includes the Transit Advisory Board. Very important, again, because transit, at least limited transit, we view as a vital infrastructure service for folks who do not have a vehicle and still need to get to a grocery store or medical appointment. So the city has almost 100 boards, so there are lots and lots. But again, this is really designed to keep government running for these key boards that we need at this time. And there are a little bit of nuances with each board. So if you are interested in this topic, stay tuned and your board will provide you and the public with specific guidance. But for general guidance, I'm going to hand it over to our city clerk, Ethan Watson. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The City of Albuquerque does have almost 100 boards and commissions across the city. These boards and commissions do critical work in a variety of areas. They decide on development plans, they decide on some sales of land, they decide on changes to the city's zoning map. On a smaller scale, you may need to renovate your house, and construction has been called a critical service in the governor's various emergency declarations, and that may not be able to happen without a hearing before one of these boards and commissions. Projects large and small depend on these boards making the time-sensitive decisions that they always make. The city clerk's office has published guidance to these boards on functioning during the time of Corona, and we are working to get these boards up and running through electronic platforms online. The Attorney General's office, as the mayor mentioned, has published guidance on how these boards should function and how boards generally should function under the Open Meetings Act to ensure public access. The guidance makes clear that boards can continue with virtual meetings and that city boards and commissions can continue to hold meetings related to essential business. These meetings must comply with the Open Meetings Act, and we are making sure that they do. We can accomplish that compliance through electronic platforms. The notice of the meetings will need to contain detailed information about how these members of the public can attend and listen via telephone, live streaming, or other technology. There are also challenges that we are working with each board on. The parties may need to identify themselves slightly differently if it's going to be a telephonic meeting or a video meeting. We are also requiring that staff and board members be well trained on the relevant platform that they are using so that they can suspend discussion in the event of any disruption. The public, as the mayor mentioned, will be able to continue to comment for boards that have a history of public comment. And we are working on ways to allow that for each specific board, given each board's different needs. We are also working on training, as I mentioned, to ensure public access and ensure that there's no disruption so that the boards can accomplish their crucial business. Each city board is a bit different. For any boards that move forward, we are reviewing their specific ordinance with our city legal department to make sure that we are complying with the needs of that specific board. While I'm here, I'd like to make a note about elections. If you would like to request a mail-in ballot for the 2020 primary election, you can request that ballot from the Secretary of State. Go to nmvote.org. You have until Thursday, May 28th to request that ballot. The request must be made by that deadline in order for you to receive your ballot in a timely manner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ethan. And again, these will all be posted. As a reminder, the city clerk has kind of a dual responsibility, also has an obligation to council and all the governing bodies as they keep the records for all these boards and commissions. So if you do have questions on this, give 311 a call and they'll get it out to the city clerk, and all the appropriate public notices will be followed. So a couple of other items to touch on. One, I do want to correct a square footage remark that I made earlier about the square footage in the convention center. We left out a 0 roughly, so there's about 300,000 square feet at the convention center, and behind me here there's about 100,000 square feet. And so that's the kind of space that we're looking at. A little different than 10,000. Okay, now I also want to mention we got some great news this morning. City Council and Council President Pat Davis, they have put together a wonderful package that they're going to be discussing Monday. And it's a relief package for nonprofits and organizations that are helping with corona-specific activities. And it's $1 million relief package. And they did send out some communication to the media and to the public about how this is going to work. So I'm not going to get into details as it's a council initiative, but I want to direct questions to council, but I want to thank them. We need all the help we can get across the board. We've been in touch with them on this, and we were able to put out that business relief fund, the micro business relief fund, and then now they're able to really step up with $1 million for folks directly helping with COVID. So thank you to City Council and to their leadership, and stay tuned for more on that Monday. And if you have questions on that, give City Council a ring or take a look at their release on the website. So with that, let me also mention on Monday, we are planning on discussing what the results of our microeconomic fund. So stay tuned for information on that coming Monday. As a reminder, which is unfortunate in that the need is so big, but I'm also very grateful that we're doing it. It was oversubscribed 10 times over. So it just shows the tremendous need out there for support of all kinds, but also at least for 100 businesses, we'll be able to help them, and we'll see what we can do after that. Okay, a few other items before we move on to your questions. I want to touch on a couple of ways to help. Of course, we are again focusing on there's lots of ways to help. The One Albuquerque Fund is taking funds, and you can earmark them for whatever you want, but key needs are hotel vouchers. Again, we're going to use hotels as much as we can for any essential worker that might get corona. Also, we will be using motel vouchers to help separate our different populations with respect to homeless and most vulnerable. So motel vouchers, hotel vouchers, that is one key way you can help. Of course, everyone still needs to donate blood if they can. And the other donation aspect that we're looking at is if there is any individual who wants to donate to that small business fund. As I mentioned, it was oversubscribed by 10 times. Over 1,000 people applied for 100 grants. So certainly a need there. The One Albuquerque Fund is a good vehicle to do this only because we can move that money within days, and there's no administrative overhead. So it's just the fastest way right now to get money to the community, at least from the city's perspective. There are lots of other funds out there too. Of course, the statewide one, the Albuquerque Community Foundation, United Way, lots of ways to help. Just check out online. Okay, our myth-busting event of the day. Just a reminder, especially it's the weekend where I know I've got to do some shopping for our family. Try and go shopping once a week, get what you need for a week, and just go by yourself. So I might even see some of you out later this evening doing just that. As a reminder, I know some people can't go by themselves because they may be the only caregiver for their children. So I want to remind folks that if you can go by yourself, if you can't, let's respect those who might not have any other option but to take their children with them. Okay, I think with that, takeout yesterday was Sharky's, good Lenten Friday fish taco. And so with that, we'll take your questions. Looks like we've got a few. Good, and I'll restate it. So the question is about at what point would this space be utilized, and also, sort of what we're doing to get ready for that. There's a couple of answers to that question. One is we are in touch with the Army Corps of Engineers. As was noted, and rightfully so, the first choice and the first move is going to be Loveless. So they have been out here and we've been in touch with them, so they're aware of the facility and the square footage and so forth. So that was kind of step one. Step two is our own emergency operations team is looking at this for multiple purposes. If the Army is going to come in and build an emergency hospital, the good news for the city is the Army will take care of all those details. So there's not a whole lot of planning we need to do for that. But if we need to use it for, again, some of these third spaces that I've been describing, right now our team is putting together like what that would require in terms of the number of cots, the number of dividers, and I think most importantly, staffing. So for us, the city has an emergency staffing plan where we actually pull folks from other departments. So all of a sudden you might have been working in Parks and Rec one day on, how to get our swimming pools ready for swim lessons. And all of a sudden now you're going to be helping organize this shelter. So we're looking at that sort of staffing resources too. The last part is, of course, food. So food distribution. We want to make sure that if we do have to put people in places like this, that they have access to basics, a safe, healthy place to sleep. So that's important, especially for public health workers and so forth. The other one is to make sure basic needs are taken care of, like showering and sanitation and so forth, and then food. So if we can provide those things and some good internet, if we can provide those things, we can utilize this space in a flexible manner. So right now we're working on those kind of preparatory things so that if we have to pull the trigger, we'll be ready. Oh, and your timing question. Fortunately, we are looking at like a 10-day window, so I don't think we would need this in the next 10 days. That's a good thing because it gives us time to plan. So I just want to emphasize the word planning is different than actually doing. Right now we're in the planning phase for this facility. We have no plans to do it in the immediate week. Any others? All right, we got some coming in from online. So this is a question. The question is, are we considering a curfew for Albuquerque? We have been doing a little bit of research on this, and I saw that the town of Taos did this. And I think I want to articulate the things we're working through with respect to this. Right now, we believe a stay-home order, as long as people follow it, is adequate and extremely important and helpful. So we have no plans to do a curfew at this time. Now, we are looking at, of course, what it would mean if we do have to go to that, weeks down the road. So, as I think is just appropriate in terms of planning, we are considering like what that would look like, how it would work, and so forth. But we have no plans to do that in the near future. But we are planning for what it would look like if we have to do that, in the end of April. And this is one where we're kind of all in this together. If we all just really follow the stay-home order, it's going to be we're going to be in a good place. We're not going to have to do that. But if obviously that's not working as well, we might have to look at a curfew. And then, look, if there are massive outbreaks, you have to do a curfew. So those are realities that we are, again, planning for, but we have no short-term desire to actually implement one. The last thing is I want to mention, some cities all across our country are having to do curfews because they don't have the legal ability to do a stay-home order. So this actually really is full circle. When council met now, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, and established the public health emergency clause that we then utilized, that's allowing us to do all of these stay-home orders as a city, whether the state's doing it or not, but now in alignment with the state. If we did not have those powers, the powers we did have in the first place were curfew powers. So I mentioned this, a lot of cities that are doing curfews, they're doing it because they don't have public health emergency powers. So like their only choice is a curfew. So again, as we surveyed other cities and as I talked to other cities around the country, they're using curfew as a legal last resort because they have no public health emergency powers. Fortunately, our city council acted and we have those. So we feel we're in a much, much better place, and that's why we hope we don't have to do that, because we have this public health emergency alternative legally, which a lot of other cities don't have. All right, I think with that, I know it's hard to tell what day it is these days, but it is Saturday. We're going to wrap it up short. Want everyone to stay healthy and stay safe. And again, if you can get outside and get some exercise, also stay separate and then go back home. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. Okay, you guys got to teach me thank you. Uh-oh. Whoever...